When you realize that it's not just because you're not a native speaker, but even a native speaker might come across some crazy word with a totally non-phonetic pronunciation. It leaves people feeling, okay, it's not me. It's not that I'm bad at English. English is a different language.
Victoria Patenaude is a respected and sought-after cross-cultural communication expert and North American voice consultant that has worked with over 350 clients over the past decade.
You don't actually have to speak in this stressed out, disempowered way. You do have a choice.
She's passionate about empowering others to unlock the full potential of their voice and foster genuine connections, enabling them to positively impact their communities and the world.
Our beliefs can lead the way of how we show up to communicate.
Victoria is a first-generation immigrant raised in Ottawa, Ontario. Born to a Polish mother and a Greek father, her native language is Polish, and she also speaks English, French, and conversational Greek.
I would challenge you to then say to yourself, who cares, right? Like, why are we so worried about what some stranger thinks of us? Truly.
Passionate about languages and cultures, she's proudly passing on her native language to her children.
You will be shocked by how much lighter you feel because all of that is in your brain. Your brain is constantly living with that, and this exercise allows you to really move on from it. So that's where I would have you start.
Welcome to the No Muscle Entrepreneur Show, Victoria.
Thank you, Gabe. I'm so happy to chat with you.
Likewise, and I want to start with a problem that a lot of people face, me including. Why do our communication skills suddenly disappear when we need them the most?
That's a really good question. It all has to do with our brain, actually. Our brain is, of course, driving all of our behaviors, communication and speech included. And so if we're chatting amongst friends, then we're in a state that is calm and connected. And then if the stakes are higher and there are more danger signals, whatever those may be, our brain goes into a survival mode and we have less access to the skills like vocabulary and grammar because our brain is more so concerned about keeping us alive, very frankly. So it's a very common phenomenon, both in our native language, if the stakes are really high or really intense, or in a second or third language, it becomes a really huge issue because we already are processing language probably on a deeper level.
That's very interesting, especially because it's so tapped into the fear of public speaking and a fear of speaking, right? Mentioning high stakes, like you're in front of the boardroom or a huge presentation that you just have to facilitate in, especially in another language. Like I just remember the first time when I had to do that and I freak out. Like for 5 minutes, I just destroyed the English language and I thought that I cannot remember any of the words. And all those things, like, how can we actually fix them predictably?
Well, the truth, Gabe, is that we don't have full control over our nervous system because to our brain, perception is reality. So if right now there was a tiger beside you about to eat you, like that could be true or not, but your body would react in the same way. And so, of course, A, that's not realistic. B, speaking in front of a boardroom or a big public speaking event, if we have the same fear of that as a tiger in the room, we have to think of the ways that we can reduce the fear, right? By being well prepared, by learning how to control our body and our voice to help bring us into a state of calm and connection. But sometimes, like we can't ever with 100% certainty predict our nervous system state when it comes to situations that are really like intense or scary. I'm thinking of like recently I had a few medical things with my children, and in those cases you can obviously try, but if you're really quite worried, then sometimes our brain does take over, so to speak. It really goes into a fight or flight or a shutdown state. But typically public speaking isn't the same as like some tragedy happening. So there are many things that we can do to prepare ourselves, because the more that you have in your control, the less uncertainty there is. And our brain really hates uncertainty. So anything we can do to prepare as well as possible will bring down that possible fight or flight reaction. And then learning how to control your nervous system via your own thoughts and body and breathing and voice. Those are all things that are possible. That is like really a great, like, I was going to say hack, but there's a whole thing to unpack with it. There's a lot to it, but it's very powerful stuff.
And before we lead into that, how we became aware about the fact that that's actually happening to us, not some, I don't know,
Mm.
very ingrained traumas or stuff that we're just not being able to control ourselves in front of an audience or in front of a situation that's really, really high stakes.
Yeah, great question. It typically, like any sort of past experience, and like even if we don't go to traumas, like I work with non-native English speakers, and almost all of them have experiences in which they felt very embarrassed, or they felt that someone was judging them. So, we wouldn't classify that as a trauma per se, but it could have still been very much traumatic to that person. And so what happens is we carry this baggage with us. We carry the beliefs and the thoughts and the past experiences. And then when we want to communicate in a high stakes situation, unless we very intentionally and directly worked to get rid of our English baggage in this case, then it is constantly sabotaging us, but it's trying to protect us from further embarrassment, etc. So for myself, I don't know if you know, but I live in a French city, and I learned French when I was, I don't remember now, in kindergarten, a kid. And growing up, I was in French immersion, so my French, for all intents and purposes, was good enough. And and then I did a debating tournament in high school, and my opponents were native French speakers. Okay, so even though I was decent in French, it is not the same, when you're up against a strong debater in their native language. And Gabe, it was such a personally embarrassing experience. Like they ripped me to shreds, okay? I could not access my fluent French. I'm not even joking, for like 15 years. Like
Whoa.
crazy, but I had no idea, like, again, hindsight is 2020, so now I can talk about it and it's very obvious, but my brain got trapped in that case in a shutdown state, kind of mixed with fight or flight. And so whenever I would speak French from that experience forward, I sounded I sounded so stressed out. I was out of breath and I was fumbling, and I would still occasionally, despite my fumbling, get compliments from people being like, "Your French is really good." And because my beliefs were so strongly linked to the idea that, like, my French is anything but good, I would write that all off as like, no, that person's like being polite. That's not true. And so our beliefs, again, which are in our brain, are can very much lead the way of how we show up to communicate. And it's funny because I finally got over my French baggage, and there was a shift, but a dramatic shift, literally almost instantaneously. And this was many years ago now as well, maybe around 10 years ago, maybe 8 to 10 years ago. And ever since that, again, like I can access my French. I don't have this shame that I'm carrying, but so I've very much lived it, but I see a very similar thing in a lot of my clients that have, like, when you live somewhere where you don't speak the language of the community proficiently, it's almost a guarantee that you're going to have some experience in which you're made to feel embarrassed or uncomfortable, because you're going to come across situations where you can't communicate effectively typically. So, yeah.
And you mentioned the word instantaneously. So can you actually do that? Like, can you actually eliminate that limiting beliefs? Just that?
I think sometimes, yeah. Like in my case, I think I was reading so much about the nervous system at that point in time, not for myself at all. It was really for my clients and my business. And I was a new parent, I think. And so I was downloading all of this information. So for me, it's like my brain internalized it all. And I literally had a realization like, you don't actually have to speak in this stressed out, disempowered way. Like you do have a choice. And so for me, it was very instantaneous. For my clients, I walk them through a series of exercises very specifically. It's actually part of my framework to first like face their English baggage, to process it, and then to do kind of cognitive behavioral type exercises to very intentionally get rid of those limiting beliefs. And then downstream of that is to engage in more empowering behaviors, right? So, like, if you could just jump right to the behaviors and say, I'm going to speak out in English, even though I feel embarrassed. But again, there will be some resistance from the level of our brain. So, if we can really process the bad experience, work on the limiting beliefs, and then engage in the affirming, empowering actions, then it's a lot more effective. And it's not a process that takes months or years by any stretch. It can happen relatively quickly.
Really like to dive into the process, but before that, I have a question related to this perception of embracing fear and facing fear heads first.
Hmm.
That is
Hmm.
damaging or is actually helping us in any way?
Yeah, it depends. So we always want, like, if you're facing your fear, you don't want it to be so big or so overwhelming that by facing the fear, your nervous system, your brain actually shuts everything down, that you're in a state of like shut down because it was too much. So you have to face your fear in a very intentional way, being like, this is the goal. This is like my overcoming fear goal. And I've set it to the right amount that I know I can meet this goal, and it'll be done. Like if your goal is to, for example, deliver a 50-minute presentation in front of a giant group, but you won't even say hello to your colleague, that presentation will likely go so poorly that you're going to really further reinforce the negative story. So you basically want to achieve success while working towards the goal. So that's why they say go in baby steps. The reason for that is you're going to be collecting positive evidence every time you meet your goal and you say, okay, I met that goal. It wasn't so bad. But if we set the goal to be too large, then it's unlikely we're going to meet that goal. And then we don't get the benefit of the positive evidence that comes with that.
I think I have the perfect example of a situation when that happens to me. For example, if even that, yeah, surprisingly, this is the 90-second podcast episode that I record with you right now, and I'm still having troubles when it comes to communicating in English, especially as you mentioned, high stakes situations. And the thing is that if I'm communicating with other non-native English speakers in different environments, from clients to other situations like social situations, I don't have that big of a problem. But every single time when I communicate with a native English speaker, and especially if I'm in their environment, let's say I'm in an English speaking country, then that access to my fluency in English vanish. And
Mhm.
of course, the fear creeping in and so on. And I need a bit of time until I get the ball rolling. And even that, my voice decrease in intensity. I'm not that
Mhm.
confident anymore. I like, it's annoying. And I love to fix that. And you mentioned that you literally have the process for that.
Yeah, so like what you were describing, Gabe, like your voice gets lower. So we tend to think of the nervous system as like calm and engaged and fight or flight. But if you keep pushing someone's fight or flight system, there's a third layer of the nervous system, and then that's shutdown. So in shutdown, that's literally like our nervous system is being like, leave me alone. I can't do this. And so from even just the brief thing you shared, it sounds like your nervous system is going into shutdown. Your brain is like, leave me alone. I don't want to talk. I can't do this. This is too much. And so in that case, you'd almost want to mobilize yourself. You'd want to gain some energy. You'd want to get yourself back into fight or flight, ironically, because that's where things can happen. What the problem is that we go into a shutdown state because there was too much fight or flight energy. But by learning to use again our body and our voice and our breath to keep going down in that fight or flight level closer towards connection, we can choose to get out of a shutdown state and then kind of walk down the ladder where we have more access. Does
And
that make sense? It's kind of
yeah, and I would
there's
like
a lot
to
to unpack.
yeah, I would like to break it for you to break it down a bit for me. You know that I'm a
Yeah,
system person and I love a clear framework. So what did be the
absolutely.
actual
Yeah.
process to go through it in order to go from that fight and flight mode to an actual peaceful situation in everyone's language? Like anyone that is listening to us or watching us to be able to understand how to deal with that situation at a high level, of
Mhm.
course, because as you mentioned, it's a lot of unpack and it's not a overnight process.
Yeah. It's actually like I bring all of my clients through my framework, and it's all really through the lens of the nervous system. Do you want me to walk you through like
Yes,
very
please.
high level? Okay, cool. So there are 4 phases, and the first phase is really to understand your nervous system better. So I call it recognize silent saboteurs because they literally are sabotaging your efforts at communication. And so here we talk about very specific things that make American English challenging, uniquely challenging. So for example, for my European clients, many of whom learn a second or a third language in adulthood perfectly, and they sound like native speakers, and then they attempt English and they're like, oh, I guess I'm bad at English. But American English has a unique sound system, like different vowels. So we really kind of there are a lot of aha moments of just discovery. And the reason why that's so important from a nervous system standpoint is whenever we feel inadequate, again, our brain wants to protect us from that inadequacy and it wants to not have us fail. And so if you've tried to improve your English or if you've tried to communicate with Americans and you're like, well, it didn't go so well, your brain doesn't really want you to do it again. But if you understand why you had a past quote unquote failure or bad experience, your brain takes it less personally and says, oh, it's not me. It's just that I didn't know these things. So, in that phase, we really talk specifically about the American English sound system. We talk specifically about the rules of American business culture, which we've had a lot of conversations, you and I, about cross cultural differences, which are always really fun. And we also talk in this phase about the silent saboteur of the process itself, because if we don't understand how to tap into the neuroscience and the principles of neuroplasticity in engaging in like adult learning for a language, then we're setting ourselves up for failure. So phase 1 is understanding how the nervous system works and to understand why you may not have been successful before. So for many of my clients, this is like a huge aha moment that is incredibly empowering because earlier you brought up the word instantaneously. You instantaneously feel like you have control. So that's where we start. And so
Uh,
that's like very, very briefly what we were talking about.
which are the most common silent saboteurs that we are basically not aware of?
So the fact that like the American English vowel system is is distinct from most languages of the whole world. So for example, like most languages, if I were to generalize, have 5 vowels: a, e, I, o, u. And American English has those as written vowels, but they don't make the sounds a, e, I, o, u. They make a, e, o. And in fact, there are 5 or 6 written vowels in American English, but there are 20 sounds. So there's
Mm.
this huge mismatch. Like you see a word, and then if you're from a more logical language, your brain says, okay, the letter A is a. And in English, the letter A can be a or or a. So there's a huge mismatch. So even understanding that to be like, okay, it's not just me, it's that English isn't phonetic. So even a native speaker who comes across a word they've never seen or read, they might guess wrong. And this blows the mind of a lot of my European clients, especially. They're like, a lot of them associate being able to read a word with like your education level. And I've had the comment so many times, well, if someone's educated, of course they could read any word in the language. But because American English isn't phonetic, unless you're extremely well read, then you may come across a word that is pronounced in a way that's completely unexpected. So when you realize that it's not just because you're not a native speaker, but even a native speaker might come across some crazy word with a totally non-phonetic pronunciation, again, it leaves people feeling, okay, it's not me. It's not that I'm bad at English. English is a different language. The other big piece here, Gabe, are the business rules, like the cross-cultural rules that every culture has. And unless we've really studied them, it can feel that our way is better because our way is the way that we know. And for myself, I'm like, have you heard of the term third culture kid?
Third culture, no, it's the first time when I hear it.
So I'm what you'd call a third culture kid. So I was raised here, but in an immigrant household. So like my culture was kind of a third culture altogether. So for example, as a third culture kid, I also like really lived that experience of literally in the home, my mom telling me what's polite, for example, and then going out into the community and those behaviors weren't polite, like they were socially bizarre. So understanding that there are a set of rules dictating what is appropriate or not in a business context especially, and realizing that it's not personal, right? Like it's not that, oh, so and so speaks in this way. And that's just because, like a stereotype I hear from a lot of my clients, their own biases, like, well, Americans, they're just fake. That's why they speak like this. And when you understand like the upstream values that are guiding the rules or the conventions, you could say, because they're not hard and fast rules, then again, you can try to connect with someone more easily by being like, okay, it's not that just like I'm honest and they're dishonest. It's that they, for example, value harmony more than I do. So really understanding that is very important. And again, just the knowledge itself can be very powerful. And then again, with the process, I really dive really deeply into the neuroscience, neuroplasticity. Like, for example, in order to learn something difficult, like a language, really on a high level, we need to look at what is motivating to the brain. So looking at the science behind achieving goals or what kind of required features does the goal need to have for us to meet that goal. So I really take a deep dive into that with people because if I get a client, and sometimes I do, and actually I tend not to work with these clients anymore, but back in the day, I would get clients and they would say, this isn't impacting my work. This isn't impacting me personally. I just really love English. And so I want to improve. And so initially I thought, like, this is amazing. Like, this is my person. But when push comes to shove, it's work, right? Like, it's not effortless. And unless you really have a strong, real goal driving your actions, then I found that those clients typically didn't actually set themselves up for success because it wasn't goal driven enough, the process. Just liking something isn't motivation enough in my experience.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, it's not just about improving a language. Because the motivation, especially when you're dealing with North American culture, it doesn't matter if you're a high-stake executive in a multicultural company or you're selling your services to the North American market. If your confidence fades away when you start to speak in English, or you don't know how to behave, or you don't really understand what's behind the scene, like you mentioned right now, there are so many nuances that you're not aware of. And speaking of aha moments, like I'm in awe here because I thought from my travels around the world, I kind of understand the cross-cultural impacts that some can have around businesses or around communication, but there are so many pieces that I have no idea about, like some of those that you mentioned. And especially when like you list the vowels, I was like, the first time when I hear an English speaking person saying the vowels like we say it in Romanian, like a Romanian
Mhm.
sense language. And then I understood why when someone that is a native English speaker is telling me to spell a name, for example, I was like always getting it wrong. Because of course I'm trying to, and I'm saying it like almost as saying Romanian instead of like for example now, like if I were to pronounce your name, I won't say V I. I'll probably say like V E. You know, like
Mhm.
it's so eye opening, and in the same time intriguing to find out more. Like once you understand this and you have this foundation, what's next in the process of actually getting this and accessing whenever we need it in those
Mhm.
conversation, in those situations that in the past probably we were like, oh my god, what I'm going to do now? I will freeze again, or will this turn out to be okay?
So that's the first phase, and then the next phase of my process, Gabe, is literally to work on our thought patterns, because we can understand the foundations, we can have all these great aha moments, but like I said earlier, if we're then carrying around all this baggage, we just won't allow ourselves to really engage. So in phase 2, we work on what I talked about earlier, like getting rid of the baggage, like through various exercises, so that we like aren't carrying that, and so that we can at least give ourselves the chance to engage. And like again, this phase is so important because so many times I get clients. I remember one lady at the very beginning of my practice. She was like, "I didn't get this job, like this. I got passed up for a promotion because of my accent." And I thought, like, let's get to work. And by get to work, we got to work on the technical aspects of English, right? We got to work on pronunciation and vowels. And then as I got to know her, she shared with me, Gabe, that she had never applied for the promotion because she believed that her accent would have been the reason that she wouldn't get the promotion.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, that's a very different problem to solve, isn't it? So I think she was thinking by being more confident, I will give myself permission, but we can give ourselves permission to communicate without improving our language whatsoever. So that's phase 2. Then in phase 3, this is like my favorite phase. It's when we align North American messaging with voice patterns. So obviously, you know a ton about marketing. So in marketing, everyone talks about messaging, messaging, messaging. And of course, we use specific words to convey specific ideas within a cultural context. And that's great. And a lot of my clients have already learned about that. However, if our actual voice is sending a different message, then what happens is that that misalignment actually signals to your listener's brain a mismatch, and it actually pushes them into a state of fight or flight or a defensive state. Because let's say I'm saying, Gabe, like the words, it's awesome to see you. But instead of using my voice in a way that also conveys that, if I'm like, Gabe, it's awesome to see you, your brain is going, is it awesome to see me? I don't think it is, because her voice certainly signaled that she doesn't care that she's seeing me at all. So a lot of my clients think that what they need to, be stand confidently in their English is pronunciation, like the a, e, I, o, u stuff. But typically that's not where the biggest like things are happening. It's at this level of a misalignment. So we dive really deeply into how to choose North American culturally consistent messaging, and then how to use our voice in a way that sends the same message, because North American English conveys meaning through its rhythm and tonality. Like that's just what American English is. And a lot of my clients think that because they're parsing English through their native phonology, they think that Americans or Canadians that they speak with these voices because they're like very enthusiastic. Like it feels like it's too much, but that's just how North American English works. So that's phase 3. And then in phase 4, to answer your question, like how does this really happen on a technical level? So I've developed actually a proprietary auditory recalibration system. And I know that sounds a bit cryptic, but basically, we like our brains learn from the time that we're babies that our native language frequency band is here. And so you start to pay more attention here. Your brain is okay to use up more energy listening in this range because it's worth it, because you'll learn how to communicate. However, different languages exist at different frequency bands. So let's say Romanian is here and English is here. You're kind of hearing English frequencies, but your brain doesn't view them really as so important. It would be like right now, if a snowplow was driving by, because of course we have a ton of snow over here, I would hear the snowplow, but I wouldn't be like listening as deeply as someone who like was a mechanic for snowplows and can be like, oh, that was a F-150 truck with this size of snowplow, right? Because my brain doesn't know about snowplows. So basically my auditory retraining program that I designed and an audio engineer created for me, it uses a series of auditory modifications. Like we're playing with the length, we're playing with the pitch. We're getting your brain to notice these sounds, to notice that they actually really matter, so that your brain can then expend the energy to listen at this level. It's kind of a crazy process. Does that make sense how I explained it?
Yeah, so basically you have to listen and listen and listen at those recordings, and that
Mhm.
will basically rewrite your subconscious. I didn't understand it correctly.
Yeah, that's exactly it actually. So all these patterns are subconsciously acquired, right? You don't ever teach a native English speaking child how to use tonality. So that's exactly it. So you do it's a third like what I created is a 30-day program and like there are these filters added and removed. And so by having that phenomenon, your brain is hearing it and then it's hearing something taken away at specific frequencies and then it's reintroduced. So it's kind of like you're that I forget what the name of the effect is, but it would be like if I were to say to you right now, Gabe, if your air conditioner turns on because you're in a warmer part of the world, like that means something really important. You'd start to pay attention, right? So I've kind of built that into the program, and it is very much a subconscious process. I would say, I don't know, I'm guessing now, maybe 80% of my clients, like they feel the effects, but they don't feel the specifics. But I do have a solid amount of my clients who can really tangibly feel like it's also conscious for them as well. So not only do they see the effects in their real life that they can perceive differently, they can tell something is happening, which is always kind of fun as well.
And I have like these thoughts that, all right, so I apply this, it works, but it's
Mhm.
something that sticks, or I have to practice and practice. Or for example, in this case, to re-listen to the training or the auditory recordings in order to ensure that I don't lose that rewriting, or is the rewriting is permanent in your
Well, it's
question?
permanent insofar as you continue to engage with English. So think of it as like we're collecting data, we're rewiring your brain until we hit this threshold at which your brain goes, oh, I really hear it. And so that's wonderful. But then let's assume that you never listen to English, you don't engage with English speakers, like you're not giving your brain the ability to continue to reinforce those patterns. So you can't do it and then speak English once a year at a conference only and expect it to stick. Just like if you were a native English speaker, I was looking at you. If Romanian was your native language, you spoke it exclusively till you were 5 years old, and then you left Romania and you never spoke Romanian for 5 years, your Romanian would very significantly deteriorate and you probably wouldn't remember a word by the time you're 10, right? So it's the same idea. Neuroplasticity is the idea of like use it or lose it. So that very much would still apply, but let's assume that it's someone who lives in a North American context, then no, it's really designed to be like you do the work, you're really creating these new pathways in your brain. And then by living in an English environment or by engaging with English on a regular basis, you continue to reinforce those patterns. But no, you don't have to continue to redo a similar training.
I see. So, for example, something that you described happened to me with French. As
Mhm.
Romanians, we tend to learn a lot of French in school, and I was in
I didn't know
the
that. Cool.
francophone, yeah, and francophone class, and I was having like 4 hours of French in class, and I was fluent. Some people say like you used to speak perfect French. Right now, like I don't know if I can hold a conversation in French. I still
Mm.
understand it to a certain level, but I'm having trouble just saying one sentence because I go to French speaking country in Belgium to visit my brother quite often, and I cannot engage in French speaking conversations. Uh, so speaking of losing it, is that permanent? For
Mhm.
example, if I'll move to France or if I move to Belgium or Canada, I'll be able to get the ball rolling fast, or I will have to go deeper into really relearning certain things.
It's the research is kind of varied in this, but in my experience, I've found, again, like minimal experience because it's rare that that phenomenon happens, but in the cases that I've heard, it really does tend to come back easier in what I've observed. I'll give you an example. My husband, he's American, born and raised, but in a Franco-American family, like ethnically, they were originally from Quebec. And and so he heard a lot of French growing up, though he didn't speak it. And when we moved to Quebec, I think there were a few variables at play. I think he had heard a lot of French growing up. And the other piece, Gabe, is an identity piece, right? So a lot of immigrants to North America have imposter syndrome and they feel like, well, I can't speak English like this because this isn't who I am. But in my husband's case, he was like, yeah, I'm literally French. And so he gave himself permission. There was no imposter syndrome. And his French is way better than mine, which sucks. I'm just kidding. But his French is so good that literally last week, like all the time, people are like, how is this possible? He works on it, but it's very much aligned with his identity, and he heard it a lot. Like I think it was the perfect storm of positive variables in that case. But I do think him having heard English a lot as a child, French, as a lot as a child, allowed that to happen with less friction, I imagine.
Thanks for sharing that. Yeah, that's interesting. And like going a bit back to the process, because what fascinates me is that almost any struggle that you have and we face in this world, there is a way to fix that, and there is a way to go past the roadblock that is preventing us from being our best self. And for example, I like while working with my clients in different cultures, in different environments, and some of the clients that I work with are having multicultural teams. I see this quite often, and especially when it comes to meetings and like having to post a presentation and so on, not to mention my own struggles. And at the team level,
Mm.
how this is applicable, because I know that when you started more than 10 years ago, you start working with one-on-one clients, and
Mm.
now you build this framework and you improve it over time and so on. And how this apply to a team setting? How
Mm.
can multiple person be basically trained in the same time?
Yeah. So for when the work I do with teams, so the four-step process I went over with you, we cover the first three phases with teams. And even if there are native English speakers on the team, not only does it make them more aware of themselves and their own communication, it also allows them to understand the struggle of other team members who may not be native English speakers. So we still go through the nervous system piece. We still go through the letting go of baggage piece, and we go through the aligning cultural messaging piece. And it's interesting too, Gabe, a lot of like in listening to different podcasters and stuff. And I kind of course, have done an analysis of like, why do I like listening to this person? It's because their nervous system, like how they use their voice, is also very much telling a story. And so a lot of the native English speakers on teams, they still find it really interesting because often, even in our native language, we're not optimally really using our voice in a lot of cases. So what I've reserved for one-to-one clients is that really deep dive with the auditory retraining, which obviously wouldn't apply to native English speakers, but my first 3 phases of my process for teams are exactly what I shared with you.
And that's the thing, like, because at the end of the day, there has to be involvement from both parts, because it's not
Yeah.
enough that a non-native English speaker does the work in order to be able to integrate better in a different culture, in this case, North American culture, and be able to communicate better and so on, and access the fluency in English at the right time. But if their teammates or colleagues cannot really and truly understand to what their colleagues are going through, then it's very hard to feel included and integrated there.
Also, for native speakers, because how we use our voice is subconsciously acquired, native English speakers typically don't have awareness of the fact that their voice also conveys meaning. And so a lot of this is happening very instinctively below our conscious awareness. So, like to take your example even further, let's say one of your teammates who's not a native English speaker, their tonality is signaling, for example, like aggression. You're going to constantly perceive that they are aggressive, even if their words are friendly. You're going to be like, but listen to their voice. And then again, on a team, excuse me, I keep losing my voice. On a team, this obviously is so detrimental, but by explaining also to the native speaker and to the non-native speaker, listen, how you're using your voice is signaling a certain emotion, then both parties can be like, oh, like this is from his native language. Like he doesn't have full control over this, perhaps. And then for the person who may not be a native English speaker to realize, oh, I'm using my voice like this because, like, to me, to do anything different, I feel like it's not who I am. To understand that it's not really about who we are, that communication happens within a context and it's all about us understanding each other.
Yeah, thanks so much for diving into that, because indeed it's so fascinating, this topic, because I probably can talk about forever with you about it, since
I
I'm
love
not
it too.
only having this issue myself, but it's so freaking common. And
Mm.
speaking of myself, like, are you open to do a short, actionable exercise with me in order to try to fix some of these things that I'm dealing with when it comes to accessing my English fluency,
Yeah,
finding the right
let's do it.
words and so on when it comes to a situation like being on a podcast or being
Mhm.
in a presentation and so on.
Yeah. So tell me your struggles, Gabe, and we'll
Awesome.
we'll get into it.
So let me think about a particular situation. So,
Like you mentioned, Gabe, like, let me tap in. Earlier, you said that you find it more difficult, like, when you go to the US versus with non-native speakers. So first, let's talk about why do you think it's different with non-native speakers? Why is it easier to access your fluency? What in your conscious awareness is different about that interaction? And let's start there.
uh, in my conscious, when I talk to non-native English speakers, I feel like they're kind of at the same level, even if their English is better. But I feel like we are kind of the same. But when it comes to
Mhm.
communicating with a native English speaker, I feel on an inferior. It's the comparison trap, probably, or I don't know how to
Mhm.
call it precisely. But I feel like, oh my god, I cannot speak like that. I'll struggle to keep up, and of course, all these limiting beliefs that go through my mind, like I feel like an imposter and so on.
Mhm, mhm. And an imposter, like, can you just give me a little bit more, like, an imposter in which way? Because this would kind of change what I might say.
Yeah, so in the sense that I still feel like a newbie when it comes to communicating in English about my expertise. And even so, what I found out that even like when it comes to my expertise, at least recently, I kind of overcome that. But when it comes to a social environment, Maybe because when it comes to my expertise, I use the same type of communication words a lot during client communication workshops, trainings, and so on. But when it comes to social environment, I speak mostly with my wife, which is Romanian as well, and friends back home, and so on, and with non-native English speakers like digital nomads. But when it comes to being in a social environment that, let's say I'm at a conference and I'm speaking with, I'm networking, but they are native English speakers, well, I sit on the side and don't talk much because I'm afraid of not saying something stupid, or I'm afraid of not being able to send my message across in a way that doesn't feel like I don't know what I'm talking about, right?
I hear those like all the time from my clients. The stupid from literal experts in their field, CEOs of companies. I am worried that I sound stupid or I feel stupid. It's shocking to hear, and I've heard it so many times. And am I being well understood? And so going back to creating our patterning, what I would tell you to do, no, you don't have to say it live, but I'm sure there are specific instances that you remember in which, like, gosh, that I felt so terrible in that one. And so first, I would give you, for example, an exercise I love. It's by a spinal surgeon called David Hanscom, Dr. Hanscom. And so he would do back surgeries, and he noticed that in a lot of cases, lower back surgeries, I believe. And he noticed that in a lot of cases, the back pain returned even when the spine looked perfect. And I'm sure he took a deep dive to get to his own framework, which is quite robust. But one of the steps is an exercise that I love to share with people because it's amazing. It's called expressive writing. So basically, he found that, and I've very much seen this with my clients as well. He found that like writing everything, and in my case, I align it with your English experiences. So it's almost like therapy, but with yourself. Like you write out everything, how you felt, how you felt stupid, how it was embarrassing, how you'll never want to do that again. Like you let it all out on paper, and then you destroy it. So it's not something you're planning on revisiting. And he believes that part of why the exercise is effective is that it allows you to really be unfiltered. Like you're not worried that Ralu's going to find your journal and laugh at you, or that you'll have to relive the trauma when you find it in a year. Like you tear it up into little bits. And so that exercise allows you to express it, to face it, and then to be like, to kind of signal to it, I'm done. Like this is over. And it seems like the simplest exercise, but he has found that he actually has a lot of clients, if I'm remembering correctly, do that exercise before surgery. And for a lot of them, their back pain resolves, which is crazy. And I believe, again, I read the book a number of years ago now, I believe he doesn't do spinal surgery unless someone has gone through processing some of their emotional baggage, which obviously in that case wouldn't have to do with English learning, though perhaps it does. So that's, for example, something that I would have someone do until there was just nothing more to write. For some of my clients, there's like one big, horrible, embarrassing event. For other people, it's a lot of the daily stuff. Like we went to this, after work, fun event, and I just felt awkward the whole time. So it can be a series of small events or a giant one. And doing that, literally, if you were to do that for a week, that's typically what I have my clients do minimally. You will be shocked by how much lighter you feel, because all of that is in your brain. Like your brain is constantly living with that. And this exercise allows you to really move on from it. So that's where I would have you start. Then from there with my clients, you
Sorry,
get, oh, go ahead, Gabe.
because I have a question already. Because my
Yeah.
brain is thinking like, okay, Victoria, but if I do that for 1 week, like writing about that for 1 week, is not thinking about it, basically, like reminding myself about the situation too much. Like that's my logical brain saying like I'm basically writing that negative thoughts in my brain instead of getting rid of them. Yeah, I put them on the paper, but maybe I didn't understand correctly the exercise, but it's basically writing on paper all those feelings over and over again, or diving deeper and digging deeper into what I felt after that, what can happen if that happens, what can happen if the second thing happens, like.
It's really self-led, but it's going whichever direction you feel the need to go in, and it's very personal. But the difference, Gabe, is you can say like, well, yeah, like it's processing in my head, but it never leaves your head. And by writing it on paper, you're also confronting it and being like, look, like this isn't this big scary thing. Actually, though, I have a client right now. I shared the exercise with her. She didn't do it for weeks. She was doing other stuff. She was doing the auditory recalibration program instead. And then I kind of gently brought up, like, you know, is this something that you're open to trying? And she wasn't even ready to go there. And so one has to be ready to even write it down, just like one would have to be ready to speak with a therapist about a problem they may have encountered. So like the physical act of like making the decision, I'm ready to write this, like you're facing it, and then again, the act of destroying it is very powerful, is like, I'm kind of done with this. But for this particular client, she eventually did do it. And she said that it was extremely hard for her to even like face the words. And she eventually had a great outcome with it as well. But she's in a, like most of my clients are just like, okay, I'll do this exercise. But she really struggled to even like be okay with maybe going there. So it's very, it's not easy to do for people.
Yeah, because you're basically facing your fears or facing your those uncomfortable moments. But indeed, in order to be able to work on them, you need to let them out. And not sure how true is this. Maybe you can enlighten me. Some people say there is a difference when you write things down on paper comparing to, I
Mhm.
don't know, writing them on laptop or just speaking about them.
Yeah. No, that's true because it uses different parts of your brain as well. So like it's motor, like it's visual. But I think it's I've there's quite a lot of research about why that's true. I can't pull the specific like brain regions for you, but yeah, the exercise is meant to be written. Though I believe he in like a I don't remember if it was a revision of the book, he also added that even speaking it out loud to yourself can also be beneficial. But I think there's something about like think of the brain again, like having control. Like when we feel totally out of control, we go into shutdown. And so it's like you're choosing to what you write, you're choosing what to speak. That's a part of it. But I think there's also a physicality of it. And I think that tearing it up, it's funner to tear up a piece of paper than to like highlight and delete everything. So I don't know the exact mechanisms, but I imagine there could be something tied up in that piece as well.
So after you do that, what do you do next?
So then I would have my clients go through cognitive what's the word I'm looking for? CBT, like cognitive behavioral therapy related exercises in which you're challenging your negative beliefs. And a lot of the times, sometimes my clients don't really even quite know their limiting beliefs. And doing the expressive writing first really kind of unearths that. You're like, oh, like I really believe that I sound stupid. Like me in French, that story I shared, I really did believe that I sounded stupid because I felt stupid during that debating tournament. So then it's finding specific beliefs that you have and challenging them and collecting data for them. So it's have you heard of CBT at all?
No.
So it's what a lot of psychologists use, but it's basically collecting data and seeking other alternatives to what our belief is. And so I did a TEDx talk recently, as you know, and like a big premise of the TEDx talk was kind of opening up our mind to alternative perspectives, because that's exactly what happens. If we believe X, then we're filtering everything through that lens. And so literally someone says, Gabe, I love your English. And your brain is going, but I sound stupid. So they're insulting me, but I sound stupid. So they're just being fake, you know? So by looking at other alternatives, well, maybe I don't sound stupid. Like maybe I actually do sound great. By just being open to that, like again, there's a series of specific exercises, but that's really the take home idea. We can then give ourselves permission to engage differently behaviorally because we don't think everyone is judging us and saying that we're stupid, which obviously, like when we even say it right now, obviously that sounds crazy, right? Like When I speak, everyone thinks I sound stupid, but really that's a belief that folks often carry in their second or third language. So that's where we'd go from there. And then it would be about taking those baby steps depending on someone's comfort level to collect real life evidence of I can do this action. This isn't so scary. So that would kind of be the mindset piece. But and again, it would really be personal to what your specific experiences and beliefs are, but I still mention that because I actually developed my framework, Gabe, backwards. Like, when I started this, it was all technical, it was all about pronunciation and rhythm, and as I worked backwards, I saw that unless the foundational pieces are there, like having an open enough mindset that we're even going to attempt to communicate. Otherwise, who cares if you're technically almost perfect if you're too scared to even say anything, right? So that's where we would start. And then the next phase would be to really get into the specifics of American cultural messaging. So, like, a really fun example between us, remember a few weeks ago when I was like, "Gabe, this is my brutally honest feedback." And then you wrote a joke, you were like, "I'm still waiting." And so understanding, like, what is expected in North American culture, which words are used to achieve that outcome, and then how do we use our voice? So, for example, um, say, like, pretend we're just signing into the call and I want you to, like, greet me. Pretend like this is the beginning of our conversation and say what you would say to me.
Hey, Victoria, great to see you.
Okay, so you had very nice tonality. You went da 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 da. And in American English, our vowel length also carries meaning. So, for example, if you were to just slightly lengthen certain vowels that matter, hey Victoria, da 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 da, you're signaling to my brain a little bit more enthusiasm, and you're causing me to have to process less because my brain was expecting your changes in pitch to also correspond with that lengthened a in hey and or in Victoria. Hey, Victoria. Hey, Victoria. So pitch is one part, but length is another part. So try that just for fun. How would that sound if you said it with a little more length like that?
Hey, Victoria.
Yeah, yeah. And so how did that feel to you saying it in that way?
Yeah, much more warm and much more welcoming, I guess,
But did it and that's how it sounded like to me, but from
from my
the
perspective.
lens of your brain, did it feel like it was too much? Did it feel fake? Do you feel that you sounded like a big poser, or did it feel fine because you obviously interact with a lot of North American English?
It felt a bit new in the sense that while I'm greeting others, I'm not always lengthening the words like that. Like, I'm not saying, hey, Victoria, or hey, whatever. Like, that will, for me at least, feel a bit too much at this point, at least.
Right. And that's what 95% of my clients say too. It was kind of a leading question. And so that's really why I built the IAM, the internal auditory mapping program, because unless our brain is okay with it, you can do it. You sounded great, but your vowels feel weird being that length. Like, your brain is still being like, "Gabe, don't talk like that. Like, you sound crazy." So, like, that's why the recalibration process is so important. It actually really helps with imposter syndrome. Otherwise, you can do it. You just did it beautifully. But again, if your belief on a very deep subconscious level, your brain is being like, "No one talks like that," then of course you're either not going to allow yourself to say it in real life, or if you do say it, you're going to feel incredibly uncomfortable because you're going to feel like you're an imposter. So this was just like an example to show that we really do need to work on understanding, like, what it means in American English to be like, "Hey, Victoria." Like, that means we're quite friendly and enthusiastic, which is actually an American value. But then the physicality of doing it and what it sounds like, we have to have that kind of wired into our brain in a way that sounds okay to us. Otherwise, there is no longevity to how long we'll actually use that. So you can see why why it was a tricky question you asked me, because it goes beyond repetition, and a lot of exercises, if you go on YouTube, like I forget what it's called, maybe like the mirroring exercise or shadowing exercise, where it's like listen and repeat, listen to a repeat and repeat to a native speaker. And I think it can get someone to sound like a native speaker. However, if they don't understand what that tonality means, then they're not going to allow themselves to do it, because their brain will block them and protect them from sounding what they perceive to be like silly or whatever the case may be.
I'm blown away because I didn't expect you to go in so much details and actually make me truly understand why this happens to me. And if any of those listening or watching are in that situation and they want to learn more, they want to understand how they can leverage this and work with you, where they can find you.
I post on LinkedIn about once a week, so Victoria Patenaude on LinkedIn would be a good place to check me out.
Awesome. And I put obviously the link to LinkedIn and to your other resources down below in the show notes. And to conclude, I'd like to give those listening or watching a short challenge in order to make the first step next week to start not improving their English, but actually taking control of the way they connect, communicate, and integrate in the North American culture. What they can do in less than 1 week to do so.
In less than 1 week. What I like to challenge my clients with, so a lot of my clients say, I I'm worried about being judged. And so I offer a reframe, okay? First, let's imagine that we're wrong, okay? Let's imagine, like, how would you behave instead if you thought, this person probably isn't judging me. This person probably doesn't even care about me that much at all. So I can just go and express myself however I want. So again, the idea of like dissipating that fear and just doing the thing that could, lead us to a wonderful relationship, be it business or professional. Okay. So challenging, is this person even judging me at all? Because if you believe that they are not, that will change your behavior. But then the other side of that is, what if your brain is a little bit more rigid in its beliefs and your brain is like, no, no, like, I know they're judging me. Like, I can see the smirk on someone's face. Like, I can tell. I would challenge you to then say to yourself, who cares? Right? Like, why are we so worried about what some stranger thinks of us? Truly. And if it's someone that you want to befriend and you're so worried that they're judging you in your second language, then that's probably not like the most quality friend, right? So I've really embraced this in my life in French. Rather than striving for perfection and worrying about judgment, even if sometimes I know I said something like funny or whatever, to really just allow myself the permission to be like, and what if they do judge me? Like, I'm almost 40 years old. Like, I really don't mind if someone judges me. Like, that's really on them, not on me. So I think just thinking about, get yourself in the situations you want to be in and really let go of like what someone else may or may not be thinking of you. And honestly, Gabe, I've had so many personal experiences in which I ascribed intent to someone. Like, I reached out and they shut me down or whatever, and I thought, oh, this is about me. Oh, they don't like me. And then months later I found out, oh, that person like suffered like a tragedy in their family. Oh, that person just went through severe depression. So it's really easy to be like, it's about me, they're judging me. And very often it's about them. And so we have to separate ourselves from those negative narratives that are holding us back.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, indeed, it's just projection. As Daryl, my guest from the past week episode, said in his TED talk, like we often just project on others our own insecurities, problems that we have, and that same happens to others that are projecting on us. So it's not about
100%.
us in most of the cases. So it doesn't even matter.
Exactly. And then even if it actually is, yeah, who cares for that person? Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's an amazing challenge, Victoria. Thank you so much for sharing that. And thank you so much for sharing all your wisdom with us today. All like a bit. And I know it's way more to cover. And maybe, who knows, you can do an encore at some point.
I would love that, Gabe. Thank you so much for having me on. This was incredibly fun.
Yes, you're one of the few that stick to the end. And I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for doing so. If you haven't subscribed already, please do so below. And if you got any value from this, please share it with a friend. They might got some value from it as well. Thank you so much, and until next week, pura vida!